Have you ever wondered why, despite all the promises of progress, so many people today feel less free, more anxious, and increasingly overwhelmed by the systems meant to protect them? This video is not about politics. This is about power and how its nature reveals one of the greatest paradoxes of human society. The more power we concentrate in the hands of a governing body, the less empowered individuals feel in their own lives. Let me take you on a journey, one that will challenge how you see freedom, responsibility, and the very structure of civilization. I want you to imagine a world where every decision you make must first be approved by an external authority. What to eat, what to say, where to go. Now, most of us would recoil at that level of surveillance and control. But what if I told you that much of modern life subtly mirrors this scenario, just in more palatable forms? Tax codes, regulations, permissions, licenses, mandates. What starts as protection quickly mutates into paternalism. And here lies the paradox. Government, born from our desire to be protected from chaos, can itself become the source of a deeper, quieter chaos, one that erodes our sense of agency. Now let's pause for a second. Think about your own life. When did you feel the most free? Was it when someone was telling you what to do? Or was it when you had the space to make your own mistakes and grow from them? That question is more than nostalgia. It's a mirror into a truth we often ignore, that freedom is not the absence of structure, but the presence of choice. Governments, at their best, are meant to protect that choice. But somewhere along the line, many of them begin to believe they must create the choice for us, enforce the right ones, and punish the wrong ones. And that's when things start to unravel. Why? Because humans are not machines to be programmed by policy. We are conscious beings, born into a world of risk, uncertainty, and beauty. The more we try to eliminate this risk through bureaucracy, the more we sterilize the very conditions that make us human. Think about it, greatness is often born from the unknown, not the regulated.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
And it's not just about laws or taxes. It's about the psychological shift that happens when we hand over too much responsibility to external authorities. When we believe they will fix it, they will provide, they will guide us, we unknowingly surrender the one thing we truly own, our will. This surrender breeds a dangerous apathy, a quiet despair. We stop asking ourselves tough questions. What am I responsible for? What am I capable of? What can I change? Instead, we wait. We wait for the next policy, the next election, the next savior. But here's the truth, no government, no matter how enlightened, can replace your own inner compass. And when we allow it to try, we become less free, not because we are shackled, but because we forget how to move. This is not an argument for chaos or anarchy. It's a call to awaken, to realize that true freedom is inseparable from personal responsibility. When we outsource too much of our lives to centralized power, we don't just lose control, we lose the desire for control. It's like a muscle that withers from disuse. We forget how to think critically, how to solve problems independently, how to collaborate organically. And when that happens at scale, society becomes brittle. It can no longer adapt. It can no longer innovate. It becomes a machine running a script, unable to rewrite itself when the world changes. So we must ask, what is the role of government for a free people? Should it be a guardian or a guide, a protector or a planner? And how do we know when its help begins to harm? History is full of warnings. empires that collapsed under the weight of their own bureaucracy, revolutions that were sparked not just by poverty, but by a profound sense of suffocation. People knew something had been stolen from them, not money, but meaning. And meaning comes from participation, from the sense that your life, your voice, your work matters. When systems grow so large that individuals feel like cogs, freedom dies not with a bang, but with a whisper. We stop believing that we can make a difference, and so we don't. That is the real danger of too much government, not tyranny, but triviality. A slow erosion of the soul. So I want to ask you something radical. What would your life look like if you took full responsibility for it? If you didn't wait for permission but acted with intention? If you saw challenges not as obstacles, but as opportunities to become more capable, more courageous, more alive? Can you imagine that world not just for yourself, but for everyone? That is what freedom truly is. Not comfort, not safety, but the sacred right to rise or fall on your own terms. And paradoxically, the less a government tries to control those terms, the more room we all have to grow. That's the paradox. Power, when centralized, creates weakness. But when distributed, it creates strength. Not just political strength, but spiritual strength. The kind that builds civilizations, not just systems. Invisible chains, how government creates dependency without you noticing. Sometimes the most dangerous chains are the ones that feel like comfort. They don't rattle, they don't burn. They wrap around you like a warm blanket, whispering, "You don't have to worry. We've got you." But slowly, subtly, they erode your autonomy. And the scariest part? You don't even notice it happening. Let's talk about how dependency forms not just economically, but spiritually, intellectually, and morally. Because when we think of government overreach, we often imagine dystopian scenes, surveillance cameras, soldiers in the streets, censorship. But real control is often quieter. It infiltrates our lives through incentives, narratives, and systems that make us feel safe but rob us of our inner fire. It's not a boot on your neck. It's a hand holding your head underwater while telling you it's a bath. Think about how the welfare state operates. The intention is noble, to help those in need. But what happens when help becomes habit? When receiving becomes easier than striving? Over time, the human spirit, which thrives on challenge and achievement, begins to atrophy. We start to believe that we can't make it without assistance. That the state is not just a safety net, but a parent, a provider, a god. And that belief becomes self-fulfilling. You stop pushing yourself. You suppress your ambition. You stop dreaming. A society built on dependency is a society that forgets how to build. It survives, but it no longer evolves. And evolution, both personal and societal, requires discomfort, requires risk, requires effort. In other words, it requires freedom. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't help each other. Quite the opposite. But there's a profound difference between community-driven aid and state-mandated dependency. One is voluntary, empowering, rooted in love. The other is bureaucratic, impersonal, and often rooted in control. When you help your neighbor, you grow stronger together. When the government helps your neighbor for you, both of you grow weaker in different ways. You outsource your compassion. They outsource their struggle. And no one learns how to stand on their own. That's the real tragedy, because the struggle is not the enemy. The struggle is the path. It's where we grow, where we find meaning, where we become who we're meant to be. Let me ask you something difficult. When was the last time you did something truly hard on your own and felt proud of it? Something no one applauded you for, but you knew made you better. That's the feeling a society loses when it becomes addicted to being taken care of. The government says, "Don't worry, we'll make it fair." But fairness, when enforced from the top down, becomes uniformity. And uniformity kills excellence, because excellence is inherently unequal. Some people will always run faster, think quicker, build bigger. And that's not injustice, that's nature. The real injustice is when systems punish that excellence in the name of equality. When we clip the wings of the eagle so the chickens don't feel bad, that's not compassion. That's cruelty disguised as morality. This dependency doesn't just affect individuals, it reshapes entire cultures. Over time, people stop trusting themselves. They stop trusting each other. They come to believe that no solution is possible unless it's written into law. Even their conflicts become legislative. There ought to be a law for that, we say. But why? Why do we believe that the only way to solve a problem is through force, through fiat, through the state? Have we lost the imagination to create solutions from the ground up? Have we forgotten how powerful we are, together without a middleman? That's the subtle poison of dependency. It kills your belief in your own power. And once that belief is gone, freedom becomes a hollow word. You see this in how people talk about opportunity. The system is rigged, they say, and maybe it is. But is the answer more regulation, more control, or is the answer to become so capable, so creative, so relentless that no system can hold you back? That's what real freedom demands. Not fairness, but fortitude. Not guarantees, but grit. And yes, that's harder, but it's also more beautiful. Because when you build something with your own hands, when you succeed on your own merits, no one can take that from you. It becomes part of who you are. That's the kind of citizen a free society needs, not someone who waits for help, but someone who creates help. Someone who doesn't ask, "What will the government do?" but instead asks, "What can I do?" And the irony? The more we depend on the government, the more alienated we become from each other. Why help your neighbor when the state will do it for you? Why build community when bureaucracy already has a hotline? We start to see each other not as partners in survival, but as competitors for benefits. We lose our humanity and become statistics in a system that was supposed to serve us. That's how dependency breeds division. Not just between rich and poor, but between all of us by replacing real relationships with institutional processes. And in that sterile space, empathy dies, trust dies, freedom dies. So I challenge you, what are you dependent on that you could reclaim? What comfort is costing you your growth? What system are you leaning on that's slowly weakening your soul? Don't answer too quickly. Sit with it. Let the discomfort speak. Because that discomfort might just be the first breath of freedom. And freedom, real freedom, is not given. It's taken. Not through rebellion, but through responsibility. Through the quiet, powerful act of standing up and saying, "I will not be a cog. I will not be a number. I will be a creator of my own life." The illusion of safety, why more control rarely leads to peace. Let's talk about one of the most seductive illusions of the modern world, the promise of safety. We're told that if we just give up a little more freedom, a little more privacy, a little more autonomy, we'll be safer, protected, watched over. But here's the philosophical catch. Safety, when pursued above all else, becomes a prison, a gilded cage. And the irony is devastating because the more control we allow in the name of peace, the less peace we actually feel. Why? Because true peace is not the absence of danger. It's the presence of inner strength. And no law, no surveillance system, no government force can give you that. Think about the world we live in. Cameras everywhere, data tracked, movements monitored, social behaviors regulated, all in the name of security. And yet, anxiety is higher than ever. Depression is skyrocketing. People are medicated, isolated, overwhelmed. If safety were the cure, shouldn't we feel healed by now? But we don't. And that's because what we've really created is not peace, but a culture of fear. Fear of saying the wrong thing. Fear of stepping out of line. Fear of being labeled, canceled, punished. The more tightly we try to control everything, the more brittle we become. And a society that cannot bend will eventually break. Here's the deep paradox. Control breeds fear, and fear justifies more control. It's a loop, a cycle. And unless we recognize it, we'll be trapped in it forever. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. When was the last time you kept your mouth shut, not because you were wrong, but because you were afraid? Or afraid of consequences, afraid of judgment? That's not peace. That's psychological warfare. And it's happening every day, not from some external dictator, but from the systems we've collectively built. Systems that tell us, don't worry, we'll keep you safe, just don't ask too many questions. But peace without truth is not peace. It's sedation. And sedation is not the same thing as safety. It's not strength. It's not resilience. It's just numbness. And numbness is dangerous. Because when you're numb, you stop responding. You stop resisting. You stop thinking. You become compliant not because you agree, but because it's easier, safer. But safety bought at the price of truth is always a bad deal. Always. Because eventually the truth pushes through. And when it does, if we've built our lives on illusions, the collapse is total. That's not just true for individuals, it's true for civilizations. History offers endless examples. The Soviet Union promised safety through total control. So did Mao's China. So did countless other regimes. And in every case, the pursuit of safety became the justification for tyranny. We must protect the people, they said. But who protects the people from the protectors? Who watches the watchers? That's the core of the power paradox. The more authority we give to avoid danger, the more danger we create, because power tends to accumulate, and accumulation breeds corruption. Not always through violence, but often through slow erosion of rights, of thought, of spirit. Now, you might be thinking, but what about real threats? Don't we need systems to protect us? Of course we do. But here's the key. Protection must never become pretext. It must never become the reason we stop being adults, stop being thinkers, stop being citizens. There's a difference between building a society that can defend itself and building a society that's afraid of its own shadow. And we're dangerously close to the latter. You see it in how children are raised bubble-wrapped, overscheduled, never allowed to fail. You see it in workplaces where disagreement is seen as aggression. You see it in politics where nuance is dead and everyone is either a hero or a villain. That's not maturity. That's regression. And it's all driven by the false belief that more control equals more peace. But real peace requires something radical: trust. Trust in yourself. Trust in others. Trust that freedom, though messy, leads to better outcomes than control. That people, when given space, will rise not always, but often enough to justify the risk. And yes, freedom is risky, but that's the point. A life without risk is a life without growth. And a society without risk becomes stagnant, paranoid, and tyrannical. Remember, the safest place in the world is a prison, but no one would choose to live there. So why are we building invisible prisons around ourselves, wall by wall, rule by rule, all in the name of being safe? This doesn't mean we should throw away all laws, all institutions. That's not wisdom. That's chaos. But we must constantly ask, what is this rule protecting me from? And what is it costing me? Because every control mechanism has a cost. A psychological cost, a spiritual cost. And if we don't calculate that cost, we end up trading our humanity for comfort. And that's a trade no wise person would ever make. So ask yourself, what would your life look like if you weren't afraid? Not reckless, just unafraid. Of judgment, of risk, of loss. Could it be that the thing you're trying to avoid by seeking safety is the very thing you need to face to become who you truly are? That's the paradox. Control promises peace but delivers fear. Freedom feels dangerous but leads to strength. So which path are you walking? And more importantly, who chose it for you?